Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. It is me, Mercy Scarlet, and I'm sorry. I ruined the magic. It's also like 9 something in the morning, and I don't feel like getting up and grabbing her paws. Her paws are probably still wet from drying from yesterday, because I recently got back from FWA, and that is definitely what I've been doing is unpacking and cleaning. And Mercy got cleaned last night, so she's now fresh and clean on my head. And she's well lit and brushed. The last video I made yesterday, she was not brushed from FWA, and she was also not washed from FWA. So I stuck her on my head a little dirty, but I took a shower anyways yesterday, so no worries. Um, so, anyways, so onto the video. How do I start this video? Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about Mercy. I wanted to start showing a more of a, I guess, vlog type video. Whatever you guys want to hear from me. I've had quite a bit of questions asked in the past, and I'm probably just going to bring up, also, excuse me if I burp. I'm still drinking my morning coffee, so that is also another reason I have my head on and not my paws, is because my hair is an absolute disaster right now. Uh, Everybody knows that when we wake up. Even Mercy's is kind of like floofy. It's kind of all over the place. She's kind of got bed head too, so you guys can look at her poor bed head. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm still getting used to being in a fursuit head. Very funny. FWA was a really quite exciting experience. I did enjoy it a lot. Met a lot of new people, a lot of people from out of the country that I've met recently. But we're going to talk about Mercy today. And a lot of people want to know her backstory. All right. Well, we're going to start with the original backstory. We're going to start with the original backstory, then we might as well go back to when she was first created. So I'm going to go a little bit into a personal life with you guys for me for just a second, and then we're going to back out of my personal life a little bit, because Mercy kind of happened in the midst of a relationship. Surprisingly, she ended up happening uh, later on, and she ended up getting her full first design uh, back in 2016. She ended up getting her new design by the end of that year. Well, her first design, I should say, the one I recently sold, which is 1.0. If you don't know what 1.0 looks like, you can go onto my Facebook or my Twitter, and I should have previous pictures of Mercy up there. There should be more on my Facebook. So I'll post my Facebook link down below if you want to go look at Mercy 1.0, because I do have her ref sheet, old ref sheet, still up on my Facebook. Even though she is owned by somebody new, I want to keep her old rough sheet up there because I want people to know that I'm the original owner. Also, if you see that suit floating around of my 1.0, just know that she was sold and she's perfectly okay to be wearing that diamond on her face. A lot of people have asked me, what are you going to do with 2 diamonds of Mercy that are similar running around with this one? Well, we're going to get into that later, and probably answer another video in that time. So on with Mercy's story, she kind of started when I was with my ex. Surprisingly, I was a furry before this. I was a crux actually before I was a fox. Surprisingly, because he actually one day just looked at me and he was just like, you would be a fox. And I looked at him and I was like, I don't know. And I thought about it for a little bit. I'm tiny IRL. I could be potentially a fennec fox, right? No, too bland and boring, and not enough pizzazz for me. I'm a gothic chick that loves style, okay? So, let's see. Then I thought, oh, what about a red fox? And I was like, so many of them. I don't want to be stereotypical. Well, that's when I decided Mercy's original, original, she was not a fox originally. She ended up being a hybrid of foxes. Yes, I just said that. A hybrid of foxes. She's more than one type of fox, which means foxes inbreeded. Don't take what I just said literally, okay? Like, not joking. She originally was, in her first design before the re-entry of the two fennec fox species, she ended up being, she was originally, yes, a wolf. She was originally a fox wolf hybrid species. Her mother was a fox with immunity powers that she didn't know, and her father was a black wolf, which ended up being the black markings on her face, and her mother was a red and white fox, which ended up being Mercy. Mercy ended up getting, a lot of her father's traits. She did have some of her black and some of her white and had a lot of the red. She just ended up being a red wolf. Um, well, then as she grew up, this is the original story, by the way, when she was still a wolf, uh, she was a very bad kid growing up. She was a horrible teenager. And so her parents decided to send her off to boot camp. And they lived on a world of their own. This was all set in a different world. And being in that world, she went off to boot camp, did her thing, and got into the military, and then was set off on a couple missions. She succeeded from those missions and went up the ranks very, 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 very fast because her skills as a fox were very quick and subtle and mischief. So she had a great way of being an assassin. So she had a great way of sneaking through tight holes. She was a tiny fox and she had this mix of a wolf, so she had a lot of strength. And, I loved her at that point. And here's how my relationship and that personal life I told you about, we're going to dip into a little bit here, came into play. So the world that Mercy was originally created was my ex's world. He had a post-apocalyptic world that he had his own character set into. So when he told me that I would be more of a fox than I would be a crux, because I was always been a crazy person and loved the theatrical type, I was like, well, that's so boring. Being just a fox is being stereotypical. And I had already been in the fandom for years, so I already knew what a fox was like. Okay? Don't judge me on that. Really? Seriously. Anyways, she had ended up getting caught by my boyfriend, IRL, which his character caught her in the world, and he was the general of the enemy she was fighting. Now, I know that sounds very cliche, but I was in love, okay? It sounded cliche. It almost sounds like a reenactment of the Suicide Squad, okay? It does. This was before the movie even existed, and I went and watched the movie of Suicide Squad, and I was like, oh, shit, well, I kind of just reenacted Suicide Squad in a different way. Anyways, um, you know, as it went along, she was caught and chained and she was sentenced to death. And this is the part that people get confused on. This is the fantasy part. Now, remember, I always tell people real elements don't work this way in her world. It doesn't work the way it does here. So everything is different in her world. So, anyways, she was thrown into the vat naked, mind you. Clothes would be obliterated in moments. Um, of course, I would presume I would be thrown in there naked. Uh, and tied up and was left to my death to sink and basically drowned in a vat of mercury and die there. That was what she thought her end was. Um, and well, she kind of went unconscious. She didn't die. She thought she was going to die, and no. Ended up, meanwhile, she was in the vat. I know, again, this sounds really cliche. Ended up being unconscious in a coma in the vat of mercury for about. Have you guys seen that show called Life After People? If you've seen that show, that's basically what her world looks like. It's literally just an abandoned. Everything's just been left where it's at. That is her world now. Um, but her world back then was more of a desert sand like city. It was more of a basically the world blew up while she was in a coma. Basically, General Fallout ended up blowing up the world and was just traveling on foot. That's when she comes back out of nowhere after 5 million years have passed because it's an abandoned now. Because when she was in there, before she got caught, things were still normal. So this explains why she's amnesia ridden. Not only because the mercury probably got to her brain a little bit. So, anyways, she crawls out of this vat, waking up out of nowhere, doesn't know where the hell she's at. She still knows her name, of course. And she sits there and she's stumbling around this building that she's in. And she sits there and looks at a really shiny pipe and she scares the shit out of herself. Because she's naked and her eyes are white out of nowhere. Yes, she did have eyes previously. People ask me that all the time. Is she blind? No. She can see. It's just the film clear layer over her eye that they would normally do surgery on to put contacts in or any kind of surgery on your eye. That layer underneath is just filled with mercury. You can still see where her iris is underneath it. It's just hard to see in only lights. So, anyways, she scares the shit out of herself and she realizes that she's been covered in this mercury and she's glowing all over the place like a lantern. And she's like, I don't know what to do. So she's dripping everywhere and she shakes it off of herself and ha 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 ha. She ends up tearing the clothes off of a dead corpse that's been there and now is just skull and bones, by the way. So no dirty, no organs, no nothing has left on the jacket and shit like that. So it's just a skeleton. She takes the clothes off of it, takes the sword, finds her other sword, and then finds her two desert eagles and heads out the window. And then on to the adventure she waits. And where she ends up finding Fallout all over again. And ends up not knowing who he is, doesn't remember who he is. And frankly, she doesn't remember him trying to kill her. So, in this case, she doesn't know who the hell he is. She's stumbling backwards because she doesn't want anything to do with people. She doesn't know where she's at. She's a little amnesia and out of it. She's been in there so long. She's still having to relearn how to get up and get out of things and walk. I mean, dear Lord, your body's been unconscious for years. You must be a little rusty places. Anyways, people ask me all the time, why didn't the mercury kill her? Well, remember how I said that she was a fool in the beginning? Her mother was immune to mercury, and she never knew. So that's why in the vat, instead of her dying, she fused with it. That way, and it became an intoxicated because it balanced out her badness. Because her badness was balanced out with the goodness. So, in a sense, you get No Mercy versus Mercy. That was where her adventure started. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That's her story. That is story of 1.0. If you guys want to know the next part of her story as she evolved into what we see now, click and subscribe for more. Love you guys.